let's stop just for a minute and think about something for a minute. You've done an awful lot. You have described, you have associated, you have applied, and you've analyzed it. And now we're moving into comparing and contrasting. And one of the things that I think is so powerful, if we look back up to how I prepared this and where we began, look at all of the inquiry that is embedded in here. We are immersing kids into all kinds of experiences and genres and texts purposefully that help them add to what they want to know and do that can become parts of their writing. And instead of having this problem where we're staring at a blank page with nothing to say, we now have some explicit ways to elaborate, some specific texts in which that inspired our thinking. We have all kinds of details that we can add. It's extremely specific and it has a lot of examples in it. At this point, kids would be probably at the point of, Lady, I don't have anything to say. Lady, I have too much to say. But I think that's a good place to be that solves some of our problems that cubing can repair for this. And as we move into the piece where we start using these ideas to compose and putting them in together with the piece that we want to write, we're going to have some ideas that really change what shows up in our students' writing, as well as give them things that they can do for themselves to go deeper than just say, hey, I got to elaborate. All right, so the next one that we do right here is to compare and contrast it. And you think about what other items belong in this category, how they're similar, and how they're different. And when I think about the caramel here, one of the things that is always really powerful for me is to look at what other people have said and look for famous quotes. And so I found this one right here. Caramels are only a fad. Chocolate is a permanent thing. So here's a comparison and contrast right here. And I love it that it came from Hershey. So he must have felt a little bit intimidated about how popular caramels were becoming. And then I like this one right here. She says, I think love is caramel, sweet and fragrant, always welcome. It is the gentle golden color of a setting harvest sun, the warmth of a squeezed embrace, the easy melting of two souls into one, and a taste that lingers even when everything else has melted away. Once tasted, it is never forgotten. Well, and you can do a little bit more research to find out who she is if you didn't know. She's a writer, she's a novelist, and she writes things about um, into novels that people read. So I copied these quotes in here, but one of the things that it reminded me of was this Bible verse that I had written. It's almost the way she writes about it is it's so satisfying. So as I started putting my work together, you can see where I began. If I'm going to write just this descriptive essay, or maybe the beginning parts of this is just where it's turning into, I've used it like this. Milton S. Hershey must have felt competition from the caramel when he quipped, caramels are only a fad, chocolate is a permanent thing. But Jenny Colgan, a Scottish novelist, would disagree. I think love is, and so she shares her quote. And then I'm weaving it into where my quote is right down here. And I'm thinking this would be maybe the introduction paragraphs to maybe the advertisement for the experience I want to do for Airbnb, or maybe the introduction to the recipe that I want to share. Caramel is the sweet equivalent of umami in the savory world. So that's kind of what I got from the taste as I was exploring that whenever we were doing the description. The psalmist worships with satiated satisfaction. And then I quote the verse that it reminded me of, as with marrow and fatness, and his mouth praises his God with joyful lips. And I give the citation here. Had the poet been alive, been able to live until the 1650s in the introduction of hard candies and copper kettles, you see how I've done my history. I did some Wikipedia work here to look at when it started and where it happened. And I added that copper kettle piece that we found in the video, perhaps his song would have turned to the sweet side of the gustatory spectrum. And so now I've used one of those fun words that I found to describe what it means to talk about food. And so when we look at how we can figure out what we want to compare and contrast it to, we see that we can look at what other people have said, famous quotes about it. We can do some Wikipedia research. And I can also look down here is what my friend Elizabeth added in here. She said banana Foster. I love that, added as addition to French toast, but I like to put it on ice cream. It's a similar way to cook. Yes, some of the way that you begin to cook this with the caramel is the basic ingredients to make hard candies or crackles and other things like that. So I kind of like what she's added there too that could really send me into some more exploration of other things that I could write about. So now it's your turn. You can think about whether the items belong in this category. How are they similar or how do they differ? But you might also need to think about if you're writing something that goes a little bit into a different perspective of, for example, if I'm writing about that piece with the memoir, what other items belong in this category of the multi-generational experiences that I've had with my grandmother? What are some other things that I can write about besides the experience in the candy store um, area that would help me prove my point that spending time with other generations are going to be powerful elements of adding to what we're working on and doing here. So, what I'd like for you to do is think about how you're going to use comparison and contrast to develop your ideas that you can use to add more detail and description to structure your ideas or to have details to add into your work.